name's Amanda Neville and I run the BFI, British Film Institute, best job in the world, by the way. And then I think you asked me about how I defined achievement, which, number one, is the first time anybody's ever asked me that question, so I haven't got a ready-made answer. And secondly, I don't think I've actually sat around a lot of my life thinking about how you define achievement, because it really goes to the heart, I suppose, of how you run your own life, doesn't it? You know, what makes you feel good at the end of the day? So is it an achievement for yourself, or is it an achievement for the people that you're working with or for? So in terms of personal achievements, I don't really have any, to be honest. I mean, I genuinely don't. If you were to say, what do I think is the achievement I'm most proud of in my life, it would absolutely be my daughters, who are fantastic, and the fact I've got a grandson, and I just can't believe all that's happened. It's fabulous. If you were to say, from a professional perspective, what my achievements are, they aren't about me, but I'm really ambitious about the organisation that I run and the colleagues that I have. So I see my achievements in that prism at a professional level. But when I was younger, I loved singing and I loved acting, and I thought that I wanted to do theatre. And I did a lot. You know, I did a lot of amateur dramatics. I did some very small, tiny productions in the north, but realised that I'd been fighting it. You know, by the time I was about 17, I'd got far too many inhibitions, and I was far too self-conscious. I didn't have the courage to take a career, you know, to even pursue a career in acting. And I'm so glad I was sensible enough to realise that early on, instead of, you know, have this romantic ideal. So I absolutely realised at that stage that the one creative thing I thought I might be able to do, I couldn't. I just didn't have the makeup for it.
And was that a hard loss, or was that?
Not really. I don't think it was a hard loss. I think it was almost a relief by that stage. I'd got enough common sense to realise that this was a mad thing to be even, you know, thinking about. So, I mean, what I did learn from it, which I love to this day, is I love communicating, but I don't want people, when I communicate, to be thinking about me. I want them to be thinking about the thing that I'm trying to communicate. So, I mean, I love talking about film. I love talking and being a real ambassador for the BFI, or, you know, any cause that I've got. You know, I love arguing for it. Whereas with acting, it's much more about yourself, isn't it? And I'm much less comfortable in that arena. I think for many years I sort of dragged around this, you know, silent sense of failure, that perhaps I ought to have done something and stuck to my guns. But really I was lying to myself, because I just had a great thirst to get out there and start doing. And it's been quite interesting with my two daughters, because I've got two daughters. One's a lawyer, so obviously she did university, which I was so proud of. Then she went to law school, and now she's a corporate lawyer. My other daughter, and they had exactly the same background, the same mother, the same stimulation. My other daughter said, she did her A-levels, got 4 good A-levels, and then said, that's it, academia's over for me, Mum, I want to get out there, start working. And she has her own company with her husband. And so, you know, even in this day and age, I think sometimes as university is used, and I can understand why, because kids at 18 are actually often too young to determine what they want to do, and I don't think as a society we should push them into it. I think with my youngest daughter, she realised something that she didn't want to do, even though she wasn't certain what she did want to do, but she had enough get up and go, and I suppose support from me to go out there and give it a whirl. Whereas with the daughter that went to university, she knew she wanted to do law right from the get-go. But I really did see an enormous change in her over those 3 years she was at university, not just the academic law stuff. She learnt the violin, she read all of Jane Austen. At one stage, you know, you sort of felt that her brain had turned into this sponge, you know. So I do think university is valuable. If I could just make a little thing here, because I think we've got our education system a bit wrong, because I do think it's possible to have both. So if I was, king of the world, what I would do is I would create a 2-year course for children at the age of 18, much more generic, so they can leave home, they can go and really enjoy learning, but it's 2 years, so they don't build up great debts. It gives them the time to mature, understand a bit about the outside world, and will give them much more practical help en route within that 2 years. Or for those that feel that they want to pursue a much more academic or, lawyer, accountant or whatever course, then there are, you can do those 3-year courses. So I think there's room to rethink that further education. Do whatever you think is right for you now. You can always change your mind, when you're 27. I mean, if you go out there and you think you want to set up your own company, it goes wrong and you realise, you wish you'd done academia, then do it then. But what you shouldn't do is go out there with a sense of entitlement without having learned your stripes, I think. I get a bit impatient with women's issues, and I often chastise myself because I think I'm partially right and partially wrong. So I have to be honest, it's never gotten my way at all. But I think it's also because I really enjoy being a woman. I love being a mother, and I've never hidden being a woman in the workplace. So I'm just as able to. We have a sort of joke. Within one sentence, I can go from a 3 million deficit to the latest handbag, because actually it's a normal thing, isn't it? It's what we do, and I think it's a sort of normal thing. However, what I absolutely can see, and as the older I get, the more irritated I get with women's position in society, because you would have thought by now that we would have managed to sort something out. But here's what I think. I think that women can choose. I don't think we can necessarily have it all. Or we can have it all, providing that we really understand what having it all means. So if you want to be a mother, then you've got to be a good mother. So you're going to have to balance that, and it will mean that other things get compromised. If you don't want to compromise the other things, then don't be a mother. I just think, life gives you wonderful choices, and as a woman, you get more choices, I would argue, than a man. You've got the joy of being a mother. You've got the joy. I know fathers nowadays would kill me when they hear me saying this, but you do give birth, you do suckle, and at the end of the day, you're often, even in today's society, the primary care. Although I think, going by my son-in-law's examples, the world is changing rapidly. But we sort of haven't cracked lots of really fundamental things. So childcare is something that I am absolutely obsessed with. So I was a single parent. My nanny for years took home more than I did because I paid tax, and then I came home and I paid her tax as well. So I was paying her tax out, already taxed income. So when that had been divided up, the amount that was left, she took home more than I did, and I was the one that was bringing up the kids, for God's sake. If you look at childcare now, it's very interesting this morning, this issue about what the government's going to try and do is reduce the number of carers that are needed per child. I was fairly horrified by that. I don't care if in Germany you're allowed 5 children to 1, or in Sweden you're allowed 4 children to 1. We go on and on and on at one stage about how we've got too many delinquent children on the streets, and how mothering and childcare and all those home skills have gone out the window. And down the other end, we're pressurising women to abandon their kids and get out to work without putting in place the proper level of childcare in order to do this. So, sometimes you just want to scream because this is just bonkers, So I don't care what it is, but we should make childcare tax deductible, absolutely and utterly. Because that way more people would go into childcare because you could pay them properly, more women could go back into work, properly. And also the amount of time that you're a mother and working is relatively small. By the time your children are 14 or 15, you don't need that childcare anymore. So we're talking 14 or 15 years. It's not like for the entire life of every childbearing woman. So so that's one of my little missions now. I'm 55. And when you get to 55, you've got about another 10 years left in the workplace. And you really start thinking, what are the legacies you want to leave behind? That's what I started thinking about this year, because I'm going to be 56 this year. So, time's ticking on. And creches and childcare is something, and I don't know quite what I'm going to do yet or what I can do, but I'm on a mission in my head, and that will translate into something, you know. So by the time I retire, I hope, you know, it's one of the things, it's got nothing to do with film or anything, but it's one of the things that I want to shout about and try and do something about. I think it's all one and the same picks, because actually the BFI is the lead organisation for film, and that means for film both for viewers and, you know, people who are in front of the cinema screen or behind or in front of the cameras, and actually there are too few women there. So, I mean, straight away I can see a scenario, and particularly for women behind the camera, of which there are even fewer. It's very difficult, because if you get a job on a film, if you're a camera person, you know, you might be shooting for 3 or 4 months. You know, how do you find childcare for 3 or 4 months? And after that time, I can't afford it anymore. So I think probably it's not going to be that difficult for me to argue that we should spend some time looking at that. Having said that, I have to admit it is slightly true, because I'm not getting a lot of support actually around the corridors of the BFI at the moment, apart from the mothers. But perhaps you should come back and ask me that in 2 years' time if I've actually managed to do anything. I think you have to get out of bed in the morning thinking, well, I never stop thinking. So even in the shower, I'm thinking about, you know, not consciously, but sort of all the time. But if you close down your learning, you know, because you think you're at the top of your game or whatever, then you're a goner. So I always say, I learn as much from Ken, who sits on the, you probably met him, he's the security guard on the front of the desk. He's always in here first thing in the morning. And he can tell you just as much interesting stuff about what's going on in the BFI, who's grumpy, who's happy, what visitor was comfortable, what visitor wasn't, you know, what he's read in the Daily Mail or the Sun and, you know, in the newspaper when he comes in. So, you know, number one is, I suppose, if you're saying, what do I want to achieve? As you get older, you obviously know more, just because you've lived through a longer amount of time. So I think you have to work even harder not to let that eclipse and get in the way of your ability to think, actually, every day is a fresh day. I need to learn more and not get stuck in a thought pattern of, you know, 10 years ago. The other thing is, people all, and I think nowadays it's very what's expected of young people, that you set out a forward pattern for your life, which actually is not a smart thing to do. I think my mother always says life's not a rehearsal, and I'm constantly saying this to people. So the idea that you would set a path for yourself and it's not possible to flex off that, or that your world might not change completely, I think is closing down, you know, lots of opportunities. So this is a rather long-winded way of saying I haven't got a pattern for my life. I don't have a sense of a great achievement that I want to have done within 5 years' time. That doesn't mean to say that I'm not ambitious for the BFI. I mean, there are lots of big, wonderful, audacious goals that I'm sure, you know, me with my colleagues will get the BFI to. On a personal level, I think my achievement is I want to feel that whatever I do and whatever I've achieved is because in my heart I think it's right. So your earlier question, you said to me, you know, sometimes the world tells you to do things, or there's pressure to do things that you don't feel you ought to be doing. And then in which case I will do everything in my head not to do those things. Because I think there's a level of integrity, isn't there, about what you do. You know, I think recognising that. The other thing is it doesn't make you feel good, does it? You know, if you do something because you think you're being pressurised to do it rather than you think you really ought to do it, I think there's always a question mark as to whether you should be doing it at all.